Luciano Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Wednesday, December the 3rd, 12:31, Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. I see we have some friends already online as you speak. And remember, you can suggest a topic of your interest to be discussed here live. Just remember, I cannot give you a very specific directions or, like review minutia about your case, because the purpose over here is to keep a more general tone about information, remembering that we cannot provide like free consultations based on the Brazilian Bar Association. All right, so just hang with me and understand that there is a limit to how far we can go in terms of advising. But again, any topic can be discussed live as long as we keep the discussion general. And let's start by taking a look at the news. We're going to take a look at Estadão. As usual, Estadão, 150 years in Brazil, one of the top 3 newspapers in the country. Very interesting to note, like both Estadão and Folha de São Paulo, the two main newspapers in Brazil, they are based in São Paulo, right? Not surprisingly, I would say. And here the heading says, how a decision from Gilmar, and Gilmar is a minister of the Brazilian Supreme Court. They are saying how a decision from Gilmar is making difficult for Bolsonaro's strategy to impeach Supreme Court ministers, right? And the idea here is that I don't think that Bolsonaro is strategizing much. Like Bolsonaro, like him or not, like he's actually a more simple person. Like he's not really a sophisticated person, right? So I don't know. They're talking here like it was a strategy from Bolsonaro, but I would say it could be a strategy from the right side of the aisle in terms of, putting some guardrails, on the Brazilian Supreme Court that, for a while has changed the approach by which Brazilian Supreme Court justices, they would actually, adjudicate things, right? Like nowadays, they decide on topics to investigate. They order investigations. Like they decide when to, present charges, and they also adjudicate, right? So not really good. And there is a reaction, a clear reaction, I would say, from part of the population and also part of the Brazilian political system to bring some type of, a limit to how far the Brazilian Supreme Court goes, right? So that's the background here. There are other news. Let's see if there is anything interesting to share as well. Here they're talking about the University of São Paulo, more specifically the School of Law. Okay, like a fight between Brazilian Jewish lawyers and the student union of the school, the student union of the law school. They were criticizing a pro-Israel speech, and then Jewish attorneys, they said, well, if you guys are not gonna take a look at both sides of this team, like we're not gonna be providing like free services here anymore, right? So that's the context of this headline. Let's see what else. There is Nubank. Many of you probably heard about Nubank. Nubank is a nimble Brazilian online bank. Like they don't have any branches. They don't have a customer service phone line. but they are very nimble. They have an app that is really ahead of the others. And as far as I remember, they were registered as a fintech. A fintech meaning a technology financial entity and not a bank. And now they are going to register to become a bank, which they are naturally a bank, right? So I don't know about the regulation specifically for banks, but that's the whole topic over here. Let's see if there is anything else interesting to foreign citizens. Yeah, I think that's it. All right, let's take a look. At the chat, see if there is anything going on. All right, yes, we have a General Principal. How you doing, General Principal? General Principal says, boa tarde, Mr. Oliveira. Hope everything is well. Everything's great, General. Thank you for showing up. Let us know if there are any topics of your interest to be discussed over here. BB, Nubank is the Revolut of Brazil. Yes, BB, and you know what? Nubank, I believe they are already expanding. Like they are actually expanding to other countries, right? Their business model is just great, and I know that Revolut is also doing a good job. We do have, a percentage of our clients who are going to use Revolut. Bank accounts, during their immigration procedures. So we do see Revolut bank statements a lot. I'm going to tell you that the most formal banks, they don't like Revolut a lot because, of course, Revolut doesn't have the same level of compliance, I would assume. So I'm going to say that they assume that Revolut doesn't have the same level of compliance that more traditional banks have, and therefore whenever we have a client using Revolut, particularly when they're buying real estate in Brazil, there may be some additional work to be done with the Brazilian bank, and they may ask for additional information about the source of funds. Sometimes. Or many times a tax return from abroad when you're using Revolut. Now, if the client is using something like Chase Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, those more traditional banks, then it doesn't cause such concern with the Brazilian bank. But I agree, both Revolut and Nubank, they are doing a great job in terms of making banking easier and more accessible, if you will. James Rochas, olá amigo, bom dia James. One question, can digital nomad visa be renewed every year without any limits, like 3 to 5 times after the 2 years period? Obrigado. Of course, James, let's discuss, right? This is not advisory, that's just explaining the dynamics of the digital nomad. And I need to provide you with some background information for you to understand my answer, or maybe lack of answer, right? The digital nomad was created back in 2022, and it was created to be used as a bridge, right? Meaning, I want to try out Brazil. So I'm going to have something that is easy to obtain, and it is going to allow me to stay a couple of years in the country until I decide for something more long-term, right? So that was the conception of the digital nomad, and that's what you basically see in the Resolução Normativa, meaning the regulation addressing the digital nomad, which, by the way, is number 45, if I'm not mistaken, Resolução Normativa number 45. And that's what you see over there, right? You get once, you renew once. Now, this was under the prior administration, right? It was created under the prior administration. And the current administration is basically using its own interpretation of the digital nomad. And as far as we can tell, the current federal administration is not concerned whether you are renewing or you are applying for a second time, right? They are not concerned with the repetition aspect of the digital nomad, right? Now, so given this background information, the answer goes like this. So far, we have clients who are applying for the third time, right? Like if you think about the timeline, there is no one applying for a fourth time, right? So we have clients who are successfully getting a renewal for the third time, but we basically don't have any legal foundation to tell you that they are going to allow 4 or 5 times, or maybe they are going to decide to just go back to one renewal, right? So what I can tell you, James, is that as of today, we have clients who are getting for a third time, and there is no guarantee that this is going to continue, all right? So very typical for immigration, right? Like when you look at other countries such as the United States, you see like, major changes in approach and rules happening overnight, right? So it's just natural that we don't have this capability of forecasting how the digital nomad is going to play out over the years. But again, I think, a valuable piece of information for you is that people are getting their third year of digital nomad as we speak. Marisa Navas, alright, boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. Aqui, dia muito especial, nível do Ricardo. Oh, Marisa, congratulations to Ricardo. Ricardo, happy birthday. Good to know. I hope you guys are enjoying your day in Lisbon, Almada, Portugal. Let us know what you guys are planning for Ricardo. Nos conte o que vocês estão planejando de especial para o Ricardo. Forte abraço e os meus parabéns. All right, Bibi, if you plan to get married, what documents do you need to bring from your own country before arriving so that you don't have to go back? Is there the 90-day fresh document rule still in place? So, Bibi, I have a recommendation, okay? And it's just like, I don't think it's even a legal recommendation. I think it's more like an experience-based or common sense, if you will. And it works like this. Like whenever you're going to marry in Brazil, you're going to work with a specific registry, right? This registry is known as Registro Civil de Pessoas Naturais, which is a registry specializing in civil life events such as birth, marriage, divorce, and death, right? So this is like the bread and butter of this specifically type of registry. And by the way, in Brazil, we have seven different registries. Many people, they like it to translate as notaries, notary public. Okay, I don't like the translation as a notary because in the United States, someone can study during a weekend and pass a notary public examination, right? Like they start studying on Friday, and then on Monday they are passing the examination, right? And in Brazil, for you to be a notary, typically you need to study for decades, right? So I'm not talking about a bunch of years. I'm talking about for the most competitive registries, you typically need to study for a couple of decades at least, right? So very different. The concept of notary public in the U.S. and a notary in Brazil. So I like to call it registry. And so going back to the registry, like when you're going to marry in Brazil, you're not going to be able to pick the registry. The registry that's going to be in charge of your marriage is going to be the registry in charge of the address for the Brazilian partner, right? So what I'm saying here is that there is a registry that is pinpointed as we speak, right? Assuming that you have a partner and that this partner has an address. So what you should be doing is like to check with the registry what are the documents that they are going to enforce in your case, okay? And then additional background information. Registries, they differ substantially in terms of interpretation of the law and how they are going to enforce those requirements. Okay, so that's the tip that I'm sharing with you. Talk to your Brazilian partner, and ask your Brazilian partner to go to the registry and ask for a checklist. Okay, now a heads up, we see very often the registry asking for documents that are going to be additional to the list. And they typically say so. They say, listen, this is like, the bare minimum. And depending on the actual case, we're going to ask you for additional stuff. All right. So just keep that in mind. Now, just giving you an idea about the documents. And of course, I'm not going to provide you with a closed list over here. But just giving you, an idea about the typical things they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you for an apostilled birth certificate showing your parents' names on it. Typically, they want this document to be not older than 90 days, all right? If you happen to be divorced, then they are going to ask you for an apostilled marriage certificate, an apostilled divorce certificate, and some registries, they are going to ask you for the divorce decree so they can look at it and understand how was the distribution of assets accomplished. All right. They may ask you for additional stuff. For instance, in São Paulo, many registries, they are going to ask for a foreign citizen to go get at the U.S. consulate an affidavit saying that they are not married. Okay, so there are other registries that they are going to ask you for something called certidão de movimentos migratórios, which is a certificate showing every place in which you have been in Brazil pretty much forever, right? Like, they keep those registries, and the idea behind asking you for this certificate is to know exactly where you have been, and maybe find out if you haven't been married in another place and now you're marrying for a second time, right? Like, I know it sounds like a lot of red tape and bureaucracy, and I guess it is, right? But yes, I hope, like those highlights can help you understand the journey ahead of you. All right, baby. There is actually a second route. And again, I'm not advising you. I'm just sharing, like public information. There is another route, which is the Utah, Utah route in the United States. They have marriages done through a video conference, right? So we have many clients here at the firm who, after trying to marry in Brazil unsuccessfully for a while, they said enough is enough, and they married online in Utah. And then after you marry online in Utah, of course, you need to get this marriage certificate from Utah. You would take it to the Brazilian consulate in the United States to validate, to give like an accreditation for this U.S. marriage. And then after this is recorded at the Brazilian consulate, you do an additional recording in Brazil. And then you kind of have like this Brazilian marriage certificate, if you will. Of course, basically mirroring whatever they find in your original marriage certificate from Utah. So you're not marrying again, right? One marriage is probably enough, right? Jokes aside, so you get the Brazilian marriage certificate reflecting the marriage that you had in Utah. And this Brazilian marriage certificate is very important because if you ever decide to live in Brazil as a permanent resident, the Brazilian marriage certificate is going to be the stepstone for you to start this journey as a permanent resident. All right, what else do we have? Hermon, good day, everyone. Good day, Hermon. Good to see you. General Principal, I read the Nordeste region is seeing a great amount of economic growth. Do you think the government will increase the real estate visa requirement for this region in the near future? general principle, for sure, there's not going to be a change in terms of the discount that you have on the minimum amount. Meaning, right, for those of you who don't know, whenever you are applying for the real estate investor visa, there is one amount for the country, for the whole country, and then they give you a 30% break for the north and the northeast, right? So general principle is saying, listen, because northeast is kind of catching up, right? Like it's not so underdeveloped anymore. Maybe they are going to say, you know what, like Nordeste doesn't need the break anymore. I don't think so, general principle. And listen, I agree. And by the way, I love Ceará. You guys probably know Ceará, Fortaleza. That's where I spent, a good part of my time, like in Brazil. And I love Ceará, Nordeste. But there is still a lot of development for the Nordeste to catch up with the south of Brazil, general principle. So I don't see any possibility of the Brazilian government, removing this upside for those who are picking Nordeste. Now, on the other side, very plausible that the Brazilian government is gonna eventually update the minimum amount. Okay, so the minimum amount, which is 1 million reais for the country as a whole, and 30% less, meaning 700,000 for Nordeste and Northeast and the north of Brazil. This amount has been the same since 2018, right? So in a couple of years, it's going to be like a 10-year-old metric that just by updating this amount with inflation alone, we are talking probably about a 90% increase. So, in other words, if the Brazilian government was to apply inflation alone to this index or to this minimum requirement, this thing should be double as we speak, right? So I think eventually the Brazilian government is going to change this number. And I was actually expecting this to have happened already. But my reading as of today is that because the current number is working so well, meaning, there are so many foreign citizens buying property in Brazil, guess what? The federal government say, you know what? I'm not going to touch this. This thing is working so wonderfully, right? That I'm not going to touch anymore. Very interesting to note, all of those modern type of visas, they were created under the prior administration, right? Under the President Bolsonaro administration. Now, interesting, and kudos to current administration from President Lula, they are keeping, right? Because many times, unfortunately, when there is a major change in political orientation, the newcomer is going to undo whatever the prior administration did, and the current administration is doing a great job in terms of keeping, the good things that were done under President Bolsonaro. Okay, and the investor visa happens to be one of the things that were created back then, and it's working amazingly, right? It's working amazingly for the federal government, and it's working amazingly for the foreign citizens as well. Moses, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, Moses. Nice to see you again. Good to see you, Moses. It has been a while. James Rochas, do you think João Pessoa is a hype or a better place to live compared to Fortaleza, considering cost of living, amenities, etc.? James, so, my choice is Fortaleza, right? But probably because, I don't know, I happen to be in Fortaleza more often. I have like a network in Fortaleza. I'm used to the things that I have access to in Fortaleza. Now, I don't see anything wrong with João Pessoa, right? And the upside to João Pessoa is that João Pessoa is smaller than Fortaleza, so you can, find real estate for better prices. like you can find some of the upsides of a smaller city, if you will. Okay, so not a lot of traffic during peak hours, maybe public systems that are working maybe a little bit better than in Fortaleza, right? So cost of living would be a little bit lower. Now amenities, I don't know. Like I don't know amenities, right? Like I mean, there are some things that you're not gonna be able to get in the smaller cities, right? Like so, I'm gonna give an example, right? Like so, we participate in some in developments like in Ceará, and even in Ceará, right? Like closer to Fortaleza, sometimes it is difficult for you to buy the same systems that you're gonna buy. That you're going to have plenty of access to in São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro or, like Florianopolis, like whatever you think from the middle of Brazil south, right? So in the Northeast is a kind of pain to find those systems like, heating system, cooling solutions, special types of materials for acoustic isolation, right? And I would say if it is difficult sometimes you find those things in Fortaleza, what you say about João Pessoa, right? So if you wanna have access to luxury items, these type of things, I don't think João Pessoa is your pick. I would go to Fortaleza, right? Now, if you are someone who doesn't care about upscale type of stuff. If you're gonna be satisfied with an average type of construction in João Pessoa, then João Pessoa is probably a better choice because yes, cost of living is gonna be probably lower, and the quality of public services, I would assume, like it has been several years since I've been in João Pessoa, but I believe the public services would be, potentially better in João Pessoa just because it's a smaller city, I assume. All right, James, but I would say it's a matter of personal preference. I think you're going to be really well if you pick João Pessoa or if you pick Fortaleza, all right? And there are other cities as well, like there is Recife, right, in Pernambuco. It also has a really interesting program like for it's not like necessarily digital nomads, but it is for technology, right? Like so they're investing a lot of money in infrastructure, like super fast internet speed, throughout the city. They are creating, I think, incubators for startups. So Recife is also doing a great job. And then naturally you have in Natal. Okay, Natal is south of Fortaleza, is another major capital in the Northeast. There is Salvador. Salvador, more historical, a lot of development, right? Like for, potentially over 100 years, Salvador was the largest, the most developed city in the northeast of Brazil, right? And I think it has been just a few years, I'm gonna, just guess maybe 5 years since Fortaleza took over the place. Nowadays, Fortaleza is the most developed city in the northeast of Brazil. But before Fortaleza, it was actually Salvador, Bahia, right? So plenty of options for you to enjoy. And my recommendation is like instead of picking just one, like you could easily in a couple of weeks try out each of those cities and then decide after you see in person how they work and see what is the best match for you. All right. BB, instead of Utah thing, if you're not American, BB, listen, I'm not saying it's gonna work for you, but I think I recall, right? Like, I'm not sure if my memory is correct on that one, but I think I saw a British citizen who married a Brazilian in Utah, right? So meaning, like the Brazilian partner was in Brazil. This gentleman was potentially, right? Maybe he was in the US, I don't recall the specifics, but maybe he was in London. And anyhow, they got married in Utah, right? So again, not saying that you should pursue the route, just highlighting. I don't know about a plan B. Typically, converting to união estável to marriage is not easier, right? I don't think they are going to give you a break on paperwork. The cartórios, right? They have this kind of institutional role of making sure that the rules are being followed, and they are typically, stickers when it comes to those documents, right? Unfortunately, I don't think it would necessarily help much. But what I can tell you, BB, is that depending on the registry that is in charge of the Brazilian partner's address, it could be substantially easier than otherwise, right? What I'm trying to say here is typically a hit or a miss. Some registries, I don't know, they just have a drive to help people out. They're gonna have some, flexibility when it comes to the documents, and others, they don't care a bit. Like, you could be coming for the 10th time with documents, and they don't care if they need to ask you one more document that they never mentioned before, okay? And again, unfortunately, that's not the type of registry you can shop around. So it's a hit or miss. If you get a nice registry, maybe you're going to have such a pleasant experience that you're going to say, well, Luciano, you scared me, about the documents, and this thing was so easy, right? And that happens sometimes. And other times, people say, well, you were right. I mean, it was even, tougher than you said, and now we're changing our mind. We're going to marry in the U.S., right? So these things are all over the place. All right, let me share an ad for Remax Nomad States. As you probably know, they are based in Leblon, very fancy neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro, but they are serving clients of ours throughout the country with transactions in São Paulo, Santa Catarina, Salvador, Bahia, and so on. So here is their contact information. First number is a WhatsApp number, right? Take a screenshot if you think you would ever need realtor in Brazil, and you see their email address as well. All right, going back to the chat window, Moses has a question. I have a question. I applied for a real estate investment visa through a lawyer. Recently, he said my name has been published in National Gazette for investment visa. What does it mean? Right. So Brazil has an official gazette, right? The name of this gazette is Diário Oficial da União. And this is a sequence of steps that immigrants are going to follow until they receive either a residency or a visa. And the process works like this. There's going to be an application, and the government is going to review the requirements in that particular application, and then they are going to either approve the request or deny. Okay, and when they approve, the next step is for the Brazilian government to give a notice to the population in general about this immigrant, right? So it's very interesting that people are going to see your name and your passport number, right? Like in a public newspaper. And that's what the National Gazette is. Once your name is published over there, typically one of two things is going to happen. One is this is going to allow you to apply for residency, meaning you can basically go to the Brazilian Federal Police and secure a residency in Brazil, or your attorney would send the paperwork to a consulate abroad so you can further deal with the consulate and eventually secure a visa. BB, thanks a lot. Check it online, and seems like anyone can get married in Utah. Wow, yes, BB, that's amazing, right? Like, I mean, they are actually becoming a reference, right? Like, I mean, a reference in terms of marriage, and it reminds me Las Vegas, right? Like in which you see like those movies like Hangover, right? Like in which people would marry while drunk. But those marriages, actually, I believe most of them, they are not legal. They're just like, as, I don't know, like almost like a tourist attraction, right? Like you go to one of these places and you pretend to be marrying, okay? Now, Utah, on the other hand, it doesn't have any touristy aspect to it. It is just a real marriage route for people who are probably facing some challenges in terms of being at the same place, because they can marry through video conference. All right, baby. So if you ever consider this route, get back to us and let us know how it works. Just remember, I'm not recommending. I'm just sharing in general pathways that we heard about in the past being chosen by our clients. All right. BB has a follow-up question. Curious, what all is published in Gazette, permanent residency, naturalization, marriages? BB, marriage is not typically, right? It's more like the immigration stuff. So yes, permanent residency, digital nomad, naturalizations, all right? Like now marriages, it would make sense, right? Because the whole idea of the proclamas, right? Like in Brazil, we have this concept of proclamas. And the concept of proclamas is that you're giving notice to the population that you're going to marry, and then maybe someone knows something about you or about your partner, and they're going to, come forward and say, you know what, I know that BB is married, actually, right? So it would make sense for, marriage to be published, but that's not how it works, all right? It's more like about immigration stuff. So the idea here is that if the federal government is giving someone, like an immigration benefit, like, the population in general should know about that, right? It's an interesting concept. I don't think there is something similar in the U.S. I may be wrong, right? But nowadays, there is this whole controversy, like of who's coming, into the U.S. And if they're qualified or not. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a good thing. For other people, I'm sure they're going to think it's a bad thing. Just like everything else nowadays, there is always like, polarized views about what's going on, right? I hope it makes sense. Okay, James Rochas, does people usually have a prenups when getting married to a Brazilian? James, like whenever people are using our services, typically they are going to have a prenuptial, right? Again, just talking in very, from a very high level perspective, prenuptial agreements in Brazil, they don't hold as much water as they would in the United States. In the United States, they're super solid, right? Like judges, they are going to follow prenuptial agreements as long as they have been executed in accordance with the law. Judges are not going to have, they're not going to think twice before applying these prenuptial agreements, like to the maximum extent of whatever was agreed, right? Not in Brazil. In Brazil is actually the opposite. It does not matter what you have in the prenuptial agreement. If the judge in charge of your divorce, if they think it's not fair to follow that particular prenuptial agreement, they will probably decide against it, and it's going to be up to you to fight this decision in higher courts, which is I don't know, pretty sad. I wish they would hold more water. But on the other side, like the idea in Brazil is that, fairness should take a priority over private agreements. All right. So that's the general take on prenuptial agreements in Brazil. And then you may ask, well, why doing a prenuptial agreement? Well, it does hold some water, right? It doesn't hold much water, but it does hold some water, right? So better have it than not have it at all, I guess, okay? All right, BB, Cauchy co-founder Luana Lopes Lara becomes first Brazilian and also the youngest female billionaire at 29. That's interesting. Cauchy co-founder Luana Lopes Lara, look at that. First Brazilian youngest female billionaire at 29. That's cool. That's nice sharing. Nice sharing, BB. All right, let's see what else. Alexander, I visited Salvador and Praia do Forte, and it was wonderful. The Northeast is beautiful. Glad to know, Alexander. So Praia do Forte. What about? Have you been to Ilhéus? Ilhéus is also pretty cool. I guess in Salvador you went to Pelourinho, right? Like Pelourinho is another amazing area of Salvador. I particularly like Arraial da Ajuda, right? Which is known as part of Porto Seguro, okay? There is also Morro de São Paulo. They are all kind of close by, right? Because, Bahia is not a small state, but is not as big as other states in Brazil. So you can actually go to so many places. And let me ask you, Alexander, so what did you like more in Salvador? Like, was the culture nice? Like, have you visited cultural places? Maybe capoeira, right? Like capoeira, feijoada, acarajés, right? Let us know what you actually enjoyed in Salvador and Praia do Forte, Alexander. Nice sharing. General Principal, reminder everyone to like and subscribe. Thank you, General Principal. Yes, if you are here with us, take a moment to click on the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe to our channel so you're going to get notifications whenever we are issuing a new video, all right? And we are recording some new videos naturally as time goes by, rules change. And because of that, we are recording new material, and we just did like two major material recordings. One was for the digital nomad, so it is like the digital nomad for 2026. Another one, it was the Brazil real estate investor visa for 2026 as well. One that we have in the pipeline is the Brazil business investor visa, all right? So one of the things we have in mind for 2026 is maybe instead of just dissuade people from applying for the Brazil business investor is maybe to explain to them how to better assess if it's a good match or not, right? Like typically we've been very, decisive in terms of telling people don't go after the Brazil business visa, but I think it's more a matter of educating the prospect. So for 2026, we're probably gonna have like one major video like we typically have, like the, let's say, the ultimate guide, and we also gonna have some minor videos addressing specific aspects of this track, okay? One of my concerns about this visa, the first one, right, is about how difficult it is to run a business in Brazil. So, like if you start a business in your own country, chances that this business is going to take off is minimal, right? Like anywhere, even in the United States. If you check the failure rate for new businesses, the failure rate is going to be potentially probably more than the businesses that succeed. Now imagine doing that in another country. It just sounds like a bad idea for most people, right? But for most people, doesn't mean that some people could benefit from such track. And so let me give you an example, like a very clear example. We have a client who we are onboarding potentially this week or next week, and he's coming from another developing country, okay? So and he has a really well-established business, and he's going to basically replicate that business in Brazil. So he's an expert in the area. He's a business person. He's not trying out something that he never tried before, and he's coming from an environment that's probably as harsh as our environment for business people, right? So for this guy, everything makes sense, and we have no issues with assisting this gentleman, getting his, business investor visa in Brazil, right? Another concern I have, like many people, they believe because it is so-called like a permanent visa from the get-go when you pick the business visa, that the permanent means that the Brazilian government cannot take away. And listen, you just need, ChatGPT in a couple of minutes to get the regulation for the Brazil investor visa translated in front of you. And when you read it, they say very clearly that if you fail to abide by the business plan that you filed, they are going to take away your visa, right? It is spelled out, right? And people still don't understand that they need to go through whatever they are promising to the Brazilian government, right? So that's another thing that bothers me a lot, right? And guess what? When you go into some providers, they're not going to tell you any of these, right? Like they want to sell you the service, right? They don't want to scare you away, right? They say, listen, I need to pay my bills, right? Let me grab this, client here, and if they are going to, crash and burn down the line, not my problem, right? So here, we do the opposite, right? If we don't think you are a good match, we may refuse providing that service because, through this strategy, we get more clients actually, right? Like maybe we don't get your business, but for everyone else who knows that we are really looking after people, they are going to come to us. They are not going to compare us to other providers, right? Like they know the type of care we have for our clients. All right. Okay, let's see what else. James Rochas, thanks for all the perspectives. Much appreciated. I'm glad you like it, James, and thank you for showing up. Matt Gaines, I was missing you guys. Matt Gaines and Adrian, boa tarde. When a couple takes their marriage certificate to the Brazilian consulate, what is involved? Must both partners be present? Seems like they could do this online. Matt, so this is going to depend on the consulate in charge of the recording, and you could find those requirements spelled out on that specific consulate's website, right? If I'm not mistaken, for most of the Brazilian consulates in the United States, and there is a bunch, typically they are going to want the Brazilian partner to be the one pursuing the recording, right? So it's typical for them to ask you to present all the documents ahead of time, which I love, right? So they're not going to give you an appointment until you actually upload all your stuff to the Brazilian consulate portal. And after you upload all this stuff, they look at it. If they don't like it, they tell you. And if they think you have a good shot, they are going to give you the appointment. I love it because you don't waste your time and you don't waste their time, right? Like you're not going to attend an appointment. Sometimes, people are going to drive hours. Some people in the US, they even have to fly out to a consulate. Imagine you fly out to an appointment and then the person looks at it and says, well, this thing is no good. I'm sorry, you're going to need to come back in a month, right? So this approach by the Brazilian consulate, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I would just check out the consulate in charge of your jurisdiction. Consulates are just like registries in Brazil. You cannot shop around. You're going to need to apply through the one in charge of your jurisdiction, and they're going to ask you, by the way, like your driver license, right? To make sure that the address on your driver license shows that you are in that specific consulate's jurisdiction, okay? But if you just go through, you could see the requirements. You can open an account. There is a system that is called the e-consular, all right? E-consular or consular electronic system, in which you register, and through that system, you're gonna make the filing for an appointment. And once you pick that particular appointment, this is gonna trigger a specific form to show up and ask you to upload specific documents to that form. Okay, so it's kind of painful from a bureaucracy perspective, but again, the upside is that you are kind of doing the work ahead of the appointment. So once you go to the appointment, everything is pretty much done, and you're just going there to receive the blessing of the consulate. Or in your case, most consulates, they're going to call marriage certificate transcription. And what this means is basically they're going to give you a version of your U.S. marriage certificate in Portuguese in a letterhead from the consulate with the consular stamps. And this document then you need to record in Brazil, okay? If you need help with that, Matt, and I'm not telling that you need, but if you guys think you're going to need help, we sell blocks of hours. And then we have one of our team members, like she specializes in those filings with the consulate. So she could do like this heavy lift of organizing the documents, tell you if they're compliant or not, getting on the account on e-consular and making the filing. And potentially you guys would need to just like visit the consulate at a date and time of your convenience. All right, okay. Let's see what else. James Rochas, one observation: black people are treated badly here in Brazil. After 6 months of living, I observe the different treatment when I explore different places. All right, James is sharing here his take on racism, right? All right. Well, James, listen, this is a personal observation, right? We have many black clients, Afro-American clients who are happy in Brazil, right? So I don't know if there is a distinction because they are, African American U.S. citizens, right? And once you are a U.S. citizen in Brazil, maybe that's what they are being paying more attention to than the color of their skin. But listen, it is an observation, and thank you for sharing this perspective, James. All right, BBE is actually asking, James Rochas, where in Brazil was this? All right, Aaron Kushma, if fairness is the guiding principle for divorce, do judges give little to Brazilians who appear to have married just to divorce and seeking money? Aaron, I get it. I see where you're coming from, right? Like, I mean, I guess, Aaron, if the judge realizes, it was just like, a marriage for the sake of, taking money out of a foreign citizen, I think there is a good chance they would take that into consideration, okay? Now, the problem is, it is difficult to read people, okay? Sometimes, this person is going to be over there and they're going to be, crying. They're going to be, presenting a persona. So there is always this risk that the judge is not going to see through that mask, right? And but yes, if the judge can tell that for sure, he would take that into consideration, okay? Now, just maybe to share a couple of elements, just to illustrate from a little bit more technical perspective. the judge is going to look at the disparity in power and lifestyle of the two partners, right? So if you find a Brazilian partner, and if this Brazilian partner is going to be a homemaker, meaning that this person is going to be at home, and then you are the breadwinner, there is a disparity in power. And, like in theory, you are enjoying this relationship, like throughout the course of the marriage. And if the marriage is over, right? Like, I mean, the Brazilian party was not potentially developing their career. They were not studying. They were not spending potentially time on their own private lives, right? So this is the type of reasoning that a Brazilian judge would have, to try to understand the imbalance in power and how much this Brazilian partner has, invested of their life into this relationship. Okay, now if there is no such imbalance, right? Let's say, like a U.S. attorney marries a Brazilian attorney, okay, and they both work, they both make money. Potentially, the only thing that the judge will look at is like, split assets that were acquired jointly, but naturally there wouldn't be much support, for instance, for alimony, right? Like for a spousal support, okay? So just food for thought. They're gonna, not just like trying to read the truth, like the personas that the partners are going to be presenting to the judge, but they're going to be looking into such specifics, okay? All right, James Rocha telling BB everywhere in general, but that is an internal Brazilian problem, doesn't affect foreigners that much. All right, Hermon, wow, it really sounds like the powers that be in Brazil are being more relaxed about the investor visa process as of late. I don't know, Hermon. Like, I mean, there is some level of variation in terms of the investor visa, right? The concern I have about the investor visa is always the afterwards, right? Like, so sometimes people get the visa and they forget about the particular aspect that I was discussing, right? Like about maintaining the investment, following through the business plan, or even like with the real estate. Like, guess what? You cannot sell your real estate. And many times people, they don't think, that down the line, they're more concerned about, well, I'm going to get like, in the case of the business investor, I'm going to get like the permanent residency, right? And the word permanent, by the way, it doesn't exist more in our terminology, right? Until 2017, we would say the permanent residency, right? And nowadays, just because Brazil is so set on taking away this residency if you don't keep your investment, they changed from permanent residency for undetermined period of time, right? So there is a reason why they got rid of the permanent residency, and the reason is so they can take away from you. All right, so we are arriving, and I know it is so interesting. Like we have so many interesting topics today. I want to invite you to come back next Wednesday. So next Wednesday is going to be December the 10th. All right, same time, and you can already go to our live streams page, and you're going to see that this live stream for December the 10th is over there. You can click on notify me. So you're going to get a notification once we are starting. And then we can continue our discussions about your immigration journey in Brazil and, if you like, Portugal. All right. Thank you again for your participation, and wishing you all a blessed rest